Hello, on this episode I'm here with Ras Vasilisin of Virtuse Exchange. How are you today?
Hi Jason, I'm fine and I'm honored to be here on your podcast.
Oh, thank you. So could you tell me a little bit about the problems your exchange is trying to solve?
Sure. Well, the main problem we believe in the financial markets, there are many other issues with the world of course, is that the financial markets are exclusive, expensive and inaccessible. And before I explain a little more about how I got to this conclusion, I'd like to give more context from my background, if that helps. Put things more in perspective. I don't come from tech. I come from finance and energy trading background, and my personal trading adventure in finance started about 23 years ago in New York City. Actually, when I graduated from Pace University, I started as a stockbroker, so that was my equity trading adventure. And in 2006, when I relocated back to Europe, I started my own company called Virtuse Group, and we became one of the largest carbon emissions power and gas trading company in Europe, and subsequently in Asia, in China particularly. We were the largest non-Chinese broker in carbon emissions, operating out of Shenzhen and Singapore. And that was my kind of thing. I was basically running mostly traders, sales, operations in 20 different locations around the world. And we were fortunate enough as a company to be direct members on many exchanges, especially futures, commodities exchanges. And on some of them we were liquidity providers, on some of them we were even market makers. And we realized that these exchanges are simply inaccessible, they're super centralized, they're extremely expensive for a normal person to be a part of. You have to pay huge amounts of deposits and collaterals in order to be even considered as a member, ranging from 100,000 to 1 million, or millions of dollars sometimes in deposits. You have to maintain ridiculous trading minimums per month. So that's probably a reason why not too many people get involved with financial markets, especially from the commodity space. And I don't know if you knew, Jason, but incumbent exchanges, especially in let's say equity exchanges, stock exchanges, 16 biggest or largest equity exchanges control 87% of all market cap of equities. And the number is even more consolidated with futures exchanges. Probably 4 or 5 different, the largest futures exchanges control 90% of all volume traded in commodities. And that results in a cartel-like operations in very consolidating markets, and it's not really healthy for financial markets for anybody. Now, from the point of view of investor, only about 4, maybe even less % of the world's population is considered to be a accredited investor. I'm considered to be a accredited investor, and I don't feel good about it because I believe that everybody should be accredited. Everybody should be able to invest. Not only fortunate enough or accredited or qualified few. So probably 90 to 95% of the population of this planet is not even involved in investing, especially in commodity space. Even in countries like Germany, only 10% of households ever invested in an equity or mutual fund. Imagine that number is probably much lower in less advanced countries, especially here in the Southeast Asian region, where probably in Philippines there is 75% of population unbanked with no access to any kind of banking, living in a cashless society. In total, there is probably 2.5 billion people unbanked in the world. There's probably 4.5 billion people that have limited access to banking, living in a single currency banking system with no ability of sending money or receiving money cross border with very high fees. So this is a problem. We believe that financial markets are simply inaccessible, expensive, and exclusive. And this is where we come in. So we decided to build our own exchange, our own technology platform, where we could bring financial and commodity assets to everyone, not only to the accredited 4 or 5% of the world's population.
Okay, so you're actually making a completely new exchange, and it's not just for cryptocurrency?
Well, if I could sum it up in one sentence, Virtuse Exchange is a crypto-to-crypto exchange that bridges financial assets, or $300 trillion worth of financial assets, commodities, and physical assets out there. So it's based on two platforms. We're standing on two pillars. One is a liquid crypto-to-crypto exchange to provide liquidity for the contracts like oil, gas, carbon emissions, gold, because we believe there are many platforms out there that are trying to tokenize real-world assets, but since they have no exchange attached to them, they are illiquid. And what is it good for if you have a liquid exchange? You have a couple of zombie coins on your platform. So yes, we are primarily crypto-to-crypto exchange, but we're offering pairs such as Bitcoin oil, Bitcoin gold, ETH platinum, ETH carbon, and so forth.
Okay. So, but I wouldn't be buying necessarily the commodities with crypto on your exchange. I'd be buying other coins that represent those commodities?
Well, the way it works, if I can elaborate on that a little more, Virtuse is basically connecting the old with the new. So the way we do it is through so-called DACs, as we call them, digital asset collateralized tokens. And what they stand for is, what is a DAC? It's basically a ownership of an asset. It could be an equity, could be commodity, could be ETF, physical asset, of course. It's just a tokenized version of that. And we, in reality, we do it with a smart contract. We don't tokenize it per se through ERC20 token. You invest in a smart contract. You invest in a contract with certain expiry on Virtuse Exchange, and you invest in pairs such as oil, silver, Apple. You can have ETF indexes paired with Bitcoin or ETH with as little as $1 in incremental values through Bitcoin or Ethereum. So no large deposits, no large collaterals necessary. There are no banks needed in the process. There are no intermediaries needed in the process. You simply click on a pair such as BTC oil or BTC gold and buy or sell the asset on very comprehensive, easy-to-use platform.
Okay. And is this running right now?
We are launching beta as we speak, and we're going to have a release version coming up in October. So we're testing for all the vulnerabilities. We are trying to make everything secure and hack-proof. So it takes a bit of a time before we release, but we are ready from the internal perspective. We're not ready yet for a public launch.
And then how do you decide what commodities get added, or what coins represent those commodities get added?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, for example, on major futures exchanges, whether it's ICE or CME, there are only about 15 to 30 different contracts, even though they could list millions of contracts. And the reason being is that people don't know how to actually issue their own contracts, and it's very cumbersome. Even though you give them the best platform to do it, they're not going to do it. So you propose certain liquid contracts at the beginning and decide on that for your user. And that's exactly what the existing incumbent exchanges are doing. So we're going to decide on the most liquid commodities contracts such as oil and WTI or Brent, of course gold, platinum, carbon emissions, since we come from the space, first as our inaugural products, and slowly keep on adding new contracts because to each contract you have to attach a certain amount of liquidity providing services, and it's not that easy. We've been in liquidity play for many years, Jason. We've been liquidity provider for 12 years, I guess, as a Virtuse Group, and I know that without liquidity there is no exchange. It all rises and dies on liquidity. So each contract has its own liquidity provider or providers, even market makers. And in order to launch these contracts, you need to have these things in place. Otherwise, you have just a dead contract, and what is it good for?
So when you launch, will it be a website or an app, or what will it look like?
Sure. Well, you can look at virtuse.com and see the demo and the way it works. We have a explainer video as well coming up soon. So it's all going to be very comprehensive. You basically log into the website, you log in directly to the trading platform, and you're going to see your pairs listed one by one. You click on buy and sell. You choose your expiry, whether it's 1 month, 2 month, or 1 year contract. And you just click submit, and you basically bought a contract for Bitcoin, with Bitcoin or with Ethereum. So it's very simple, and it's very inclusive for everybody. And again, there are no banks or custodians or intermediaries involved. So incremental values are very low, the fees are very low, and the simplicity of the platform from the technological point of view is very simple at Virtus Exchange.
And so what have been some of the biggest challenges of developing this product?
Well, there are many challenges, of course. If I could divide them into macroeconomic and microeconomic, blockchain ecosystem has tons of hurdles, as you well know, Jason. So there's a technological hurdle, there is a legal hurdle, there is a liquidity hurdle. By technological hurdle, I mean the technology is very naive. It's still very naive. It's slow. What Ethereum has 15 transactions per second. That's it. Bitcoin maybe 3 or 4 without Lightning Network. Comparing to Visa, which has 65,000 transactions per second, it's still nothing. So if you build a business, it's still not scalable enough. You're at the mercy of the protocol, and technology needs a lot of innovation in order to get where we need it to get. From the legal perspective, as I said earlier, only 1 to 5% of the world's population, depending on the jurisdiction, are accredited investors. And that's just not right, because most of the world, vast majority of the world, is excluded from investing. And I believe that should be changed completely. From the liquidity point of view, I mean, the market is what, 200 billion roughly. What happens if you have trillions of dollars from pension funds entering the market? How are you going to scale? So technology is still naive. Now, from microeconomic perspective, from Virtuse point of view, well, there are all kinds of parts of equations for in terms of the hurdles. I mean, liquidity, privacy, security, regulations, even timing should be right, which we don't really control at all. But I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years, and I'm not only a C-level manager with a great car and benefits. I'm not only an enthusiast with an idea. I believe Mark Cuban once famously said that there's probably 100 people right now looking at the same idea, and the difference between your success and their failure is in execution. And this is where we're good at, because we bought and sold companies, branches, divisions with Virtus Group. We established one of the most successful brokerage companies in Europe, therefore maybe in the world in terms of carbon emissions, in China. We walk the walk, not talk the talk. So as pioneers in many areas, we believe we can become pioneers in this area as well. When we started carbon emissions business in 2006 or 7, there were probably thousands of different brokerages. When we, and as of last year, we were one of 3 largest. So I believe execution is something that's crucial, and this is where we're good at, and hopefully we'll succeed.
It seems like you'd have to deal with a lot of regulation building an exchange like this.
Yes, absolutely. Well, as of now, there is no real regulation. We have to distinguish between statements from SEC or MAS and the actual regulation. So I have a different view on regulation. I'm not really pro-regulation, I must say. I believe that oversight in some way is crucial, but in most cases, regulation is basically hidden tax on the markets. It stifles innovation. It basically puts barriers to entry to the newcomers and favoring incumbents. I'm sure you've heard of revolving door strategy or syndrome, where incumbents and large institutions have revolving door with the governments, and they mold and craft their regulation the way that favors them, of course. And this is why it stifles innovation and favors monopolies and oligopolies in many areas. And I believe I'm an Austrian economic school disciple, and I believe in free markets, not socialist markets. And I believe free markets should be self-regulated, and regulations should be self-regulated as well. Now, some proponents might argue that regulations reduce scams. And in fact, that's not really the case, because I always remind them of financial crisis in 2008, gold market rigging, LIBOR manipulation, and I can just go on and on. All these manipulations and crises actually happened in the most regulated environments, in banking, in commodity space, where there are several types of regulations from several regulators at the same time, and they still do happen. So I don't believe they prevent scams, and I believe in a way that people are smart enough to invest, smart enough to lose money. Everybody's smart enough to buy a tennis shoe. Everybody's smart enough to choose their spouse, wife or husband. I believe the same way governments or regulators should not interfere into what we are buying or selling, where we are investing. I believe that people should learn to invest instead of spend, especially in an inflationary environment where we're living, with trillions of dollars printed right now all over the world, whether it's ECB or Fed. They've been printing trillions in the last 8 or 10 years. And people should protect themselves by investing rather than saving, because their money is being depreciated every year, and God forbid they spend it, because then they end up with having nothing. So investing is is a key.
I think your point is well illustrated by the accredited investor system. Would you mind briefly telling my listeners about that?
Well, as I said, I'm fortunate enough to be an accredited investor, and I hate the fact that I am, because it basically limits through KYC, or Know Your Client, and AML, anti-money laundering regulations, amount of people that can actually be part of the financial system. So you have to fill out so many forms, and you have to qualify with so many different documentations that most of the population is automatically excluded from investing. And as I said, I don't believe that's the right way to treat your public, regardless of the country where you are. I believe my mother can go to a casino and spend $1 million. Nobody's gonna tell her anything, but God forbid she touches a commodity or startup investment. She's not qualified. She's not accredited. So there's no logic in it, and I believe that it's counterproductive for everybody else.
Well, what are some of your plans for the future for this project?
Well, we have many plans, of course. I'm a strong believer in goals. I believe that without a plan or goal. It's just a dream. It's an idea. Goals are dreams with deadlines. That's what I believe. And always the best time to invest, Jason, was 5 years ago. And I should have done that, and should have invested there. I should have started there. And I believe 5 years from now, you may wish you had started today. So we believe this is a good time. We have a very strict goal, very specific goals. Of course, in my life I had different goals, but for Virtuse Exchange, we believe that we need to democratize investings for the entire planet, not only for the selected few. And we'd like to allow at least 50% of the population of the planet to be able to invest. And according to Deutsche Bank, global financial assets represent $300 trillion market, which is roughly 1,000 times larger than crypto markets. And we calculated that in order to get to 50% penetration, we would at least have to trade 1% of these assets on our platform. That's 3 trillion. So 2 or 3 trillion. So people get liquidity and be able to invest pretty much in any contract they want, even if with such a numbers. 2 or 3 billion people needs a certain amount of liquidity. So I believe that's our plan for 5 years, if I remember, from 2023 until 2023. And we want to be at the forefront of the tokenization market and, of course, crypto revolution. I understand it will take some time. Rome wasn't built in a day, but it's imperative that we try. So we will succeed.
And do you have any ICO upcoming at all?
Yes. Well, we're doing an ICO. We actually a reverse ICO. So we're an existing company that is trying to fund the new operation from the existing operation. So we don't really need a ICO for the sake of money raising. We don't even have large investors. We completely finance it by ourselves. But we need an ICO for the purposes of bringing awareness about the exchange. And I believe ICO is a great tool to build a community of 20, 30, 40,000 people that can be converted into users on the platform and be able to trade. So if a Virt token is sold to the user or contributor on ICO, then the Virt token is going to be traded on our exchange. Immediately we have some kind of conversion rate. So we believe that's a great tool for bringing awareness about the project. And I'm very thankful for this particular way of fundraising. 2-3 years ago, it didn't exist, and I believe it's one of the best tools to fundraise and bring awareness about the project.
Well, it's been a very interesting conversation. Is there anything that I should have asked you that maybe I missed?
Well, I already touched on the topic of regulations, but I believe that just to state the fact and obvious, and repeat what I said, I believe that 5% of the population of the world is not enough to be included in financial markets, and regulation prohibits the rest of the population of this planet to be part of. I believe people are smart enough and dumb enough to invest and lose, to buy and sell. All of us are smart enough and dumb enough, and I believe everybody should get that opportunity. As I said, especially in an inflationary environment, it's better to invest than to save or spend.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Jason. I'm honored again, and thank you very much.
Hello, if you like this episode and you want to hear more like it, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way you'll get every single episode. The Talking Cryptocurrency podcast is available on all podcast clients. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. And if podcasts aren't your thing, I publish video versions of these interviews on YouTube and DTube, so you can subscribe there too. All the links to all that stuff is going to be in the show notes. So please, if you want to hear more of this show, subscribe.